In the swirling currents of the Mississippi River, a tale of human tragedy awaits, its echoes still resonating through the annals of time. This is the story of the SS Sultana, a steamboat that plied its trade on the mighty waterway, ferrying passengers and cargo between Memphis and Vicksburg. On the surface, it was just another vessel, one of many that crisscrossed the river during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War. But scratch beneath the veneer, and a more complex narrative unfolds, one of captivity, liberation, and ultimately catastrophe. April 1865. The war had been all but won by the Union, its outcome almost certain. Confederate General Robert E. Lee's army was in disarray, while President Jefferson Davis was on the run. Yet, amidst this backdrop of victory and defeat, a different kind of drama was playing out. In Memphis, Union prisoners languished in overcrowded camps, their fate uncertain as they waited for release or repatriation. Among them were soldiers who had been captured at Shiloh, Corinth, and other key battles. Some had been imprisoned for months, others for years, their experiences a blur of hardship, hunger, and hopelessness. Then came the news. General William Tecumseh Sherman's army was marching through Georgia, its path clear to Atlanta. As Union forces tightened their grip on the South, prisoners began to be freed, their numbers swelling the ranks of those eager to return home. It was a moment of liberation, but also of chaos. Steamboats like the Sultana sprang into action, offering passage from Memphis to Vicksburg and other points downstream. They were the lifeblood of the river trade, connecting cities and towns along the Mississippi's 350-mile course. With their flat bottoms and shallow draft, these boats could navigate the treacherous waters with ease, carrying everything from cotton bales to troops. As we step aboard the Sultana, let us be reminded that this was no ordinary vessel. Built in 1863, it was one of the largest steamboats on the river, its iron hull a testament to modern engineering. With a length of over 250 feet, and a beam of nearly 40, capacity-wise, it was among the largest passenger ships plying the Mississippi. Its crew, seasoned veterans of the river trade, knew every bend and eddy by heart. They had worked together for months, some even years, developing a rhythm that allowed them to navigate the treacherous waters with ease. Theirs was a world governed by routine, a daily grind of navigating currents, loading cargo, and catering to passengers. Yet amidst this sea of familiarity, there were whispers of discontent. Some crew members had grown disillusioned with their working conditions, while others grumbled about the constant changes in passenger traffic. And then, of course, there was the matter of the war, its impact on river trade, the constant flux of prisoners and soldiers, and the rising tensions between North and South. As we set our sights downstream, the Mississippi River stretches out before us like a lifeblood of America's past. We'll follow its currents, tracing the path of the Sultana from Memphis to Vicksburg, where fate would intervene in ways both tragic and unfathomable. In the coming chapters, we'll delve into the fateful night of April 27th, when disaster struck with a ferocity that would shake the very foundations of history. As we follow the SS Sultana's journey downstream, it's essential to understand the context in which she sailed. The United States was embroiled in its most devastating conflict since the American Revolution, the Civil War. Brothers clashed against brothers, fathers fought sons, and families were torn apart by the bitter divisions that would soon consume a nation. The war had raged for 4 years, fueled by deep-seated differences over slavery, states' rights, and economic inequality. The Union, led by President Abraham Lincoln, sought to preserve the unity of the Republic, while the Confederacy, comprising 11 Southern states, aimed to establish itself as a sovereign nation. The war had already claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, leaving countless more scarred and shattered. As we navigate these treacherous waters, it's crucial to grasp the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined this period in American history. The Union Army, bolstered by abolitionists and freed slaves, fought against the Confederate forces, backed by European powers and Southern sympathizers. Within the Union itself, divisions emerged between Northern Democrats and Republicans, who debated whether to prioritize emancipation or preserve the Union at any cost. Meanwhile, on the Mississippi River, a pivotal battle was unfolding. Vicksburg, the last Confederate stronghold on the mighty river, stood defiant against the relentless pressure of Union forces, led by General Ulysses S. Grant. The siege, which began in May 1863, would become one of the most grueling and costly battles of the Civil War. In this cauldron of conflict, the SS Sultana navigated treacherous waters, with its crew and passengers comprising a mix of Union soldiers, civilians, and freed slaves. The boat was a microcosm of the war-torn nation it traversed. The vessel's cargo included crucial supplies for the besieged city of Vicksburg, as well as precious medical equipment to treat the countless wounded. As we delve deeper into this story, it becomes increasingly clear that the SS Sultana's fate was inextricably linked to the tumultuous events unfolding around her. The war had unleashed a maelstrom of destruction and chaos, testing the very fabric of American society. In the midst of such turmoil, an unspeakable tragedy would soon unfold, one that would challenge the notion that even the most horrific disasters occur during times of war. The SS Sultana's crew was aware of the dangers lurking beneath the surface literally. As they navigated the treacherous waters of the Mississippi, they had to contend with a multitude of hazards, from Confederate snipers and river pirates to raging storms and malfunctioning equipment. Yet despite these perils, the boat pressed on, its destination ever closer. In Vicksburg, the Union Army's relentless assault was starting to pay dividends. On July 4, 1863, after 47 days of siege warfare, General Grant accepted the surrender of Confederate forces. The fall of Vicksburg marked a decisive turning point in the war, opening up the Mississippi River to Union control and paving the way for the ultimate defeat of the Confederacy. However, the SS Sultana's journey would soon reach its own critical juncture, one that would forever alter the course of history. As we approach the fateful night of April 27, 1865, a sense of foreboding begins to settle over the boat and its passengers. The winds are changing, and disaster is about to strike with a ferocity that will shake the very foundations of this tumultuous era. And so, as we prepare to embark on the most harrowing chapter of our story yet, we find ourselves hurtling toward a moment that will test the limits of human endurance, a moment that will raise questions about the true cost of war and the price paid by those who fought it. What lies ahead is a tale of tragedy, sacrifice, and resilience, one that will challenge our understanding of this pivotal moment in American history. The Mississippi River, its waters swollen by springtime rains, stretched out before the SS Sultana like an endless highway of liquid steel. On this fateful day, April 22, 1865, the steamboat was preparing to embark on what would become one of the most ill-fated voyages in American history. As the sun rose over Memphis, a city still reeling from the aftermath of war, the Sultana's passengers began to board. They were a diverse crowd, soldiers returning home after 4 years of conflict, civilians eager to escape the ravages of war-torn cities, and even some freed slaves seeking a new life beyond the Mississippi's banks. The statistics are staggering. Over 400 people crammed onto a vessel designed to carry half that number. The Sultana itself was no stranger to overcrowding. It had been pressed into service as a troopship during the war, ferrying soldiers and supplies along the treacherous river routes. As the passengers poured onto the ship, they were greeted by the warm smile of Captain James Cassidy, a grizzled veteran of the Mississippi River. A man of great experience and little patience, Cassidy had seen it all from the battles of Shiloh to the siege of Vicksburg. He knew the river like the back of his hand, but he also knew its dangers. The Sultana set off from Memphis at 9:30 a.m., chugging slowly upstream as the city's bustling wharves receded into the distance. The passengers were a mixed bag, some rowdy and boisterous, others subdued and somber, but all shared one thing in common: they were eager to put the horrors of war behind them. As the boat rounded the first bend in the river, the scenery shifted from urban bustle to rural tranquility. The Mississippi's lush greenery closed in around the Sultana like a verdant curtain. Cypress trees towered above the waterline, their knotted branches twisted into grotesque shapes by time and weather. The passengers were in high spirits, laughing and chatting as they found their seats on the crowded decks. Some were playing cards or telling stories of wartime exploits. Others were simply enjoying the warm sunshine and gentle breeze that rustled through the trees. Meanwhile, below deck, the ship's crew was busy checking the engines and making final preparations for the long journey ahead. The Sultana's boilers were burning hot coal, generating a plume of steam that rose into the air like a ghostly finger pointing towards the heavens. The river itself was in a state of flux, swollen by heavy rainfall and springtime thaw, its waters churned with an almost liquid fury. The crew knew this stretch of water all too well. It was notorious for its hidden dangers, treacherous sandbars, submerged logs, and uncharted currents that could snap a ship's hull like a twig. Yet Captain Cassidy seemed undaunted by the challenges ahead. He had navigated these waters countless times before. He knew every bend and eddy, every hidden shoal and rocky outcropping. The Sultana was his domain, and he would steer her safely to her destination, no matter what dangers lay in wait. As the morning wore on, the passengers began to settle into their seats, contenting themselves with the gentle rocking motion of the ship as it chugged along the river's serpentine course. The sun beat down upon them, its warmth soaking through their clothing like a balm for weary souls. But amidst all this tranquility, a sense of unease hung in the air, a feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. A nagging fear, unspoken but palpable, seemed to hover over the Sultana's crowded decks like a specter waiting to strike. And so we leave our story here for now, as the SS Sultana chugs steadily on into the unknown. The calm before the storm is a fragile thing, one that can shatter at any moment. What lies ahead will test the limits of human endurance. The SS Sultana chugged steadily on, its decks teeming with life, as it navigated the treacherous waters of the Mississippi River. On board were over 300 passengers, a cacophonous mix of Union prisoners, soldiers, and civilians, all packed like sardines in an effort to reach their destination. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, smoke, and desperation. In the cargo holds below deck, a menagerie of livestock groaned and bleated, adding to the cacophony above. Horses, mules, and cattle were being transported south, bound for farms and plantations in what was then known as the Confederate States of America. The livestock was meant to help rebuild the war-torn region, but it also posed a significant risk. On board, animals can panic easily, and when they do, chaos ensues. As the Sultana continued its journey, its cargo also included boxes of medical supplies, ammunition, and equipment for the Union Army. These goods were vital for the ongoing conflict, but in this moment, no one could foresee the disaster that was about to unfold. The Sultana's passengers were oblivious to the dangers lurking beneath their feet, or so they thought. Among them were over 400 Union prisoners of war, many of whom had been imprisoned at Camp Ford in Texas for months on end. These men had endured unimaginable hardships, forced labor, and brutal treatment at the hands of their Confederate captors. Now, after being released from captivity, they were seeking to return to their families and resume their lives. Soldiers fresh from the war front swarmed the decks, exhausted but jubilant at finally being free from combat. Civilians, merchants, traders, and travelers jostled for space alongside them, all united in their desire to escape the devastation of the conflict. Children laughed and played amidst the mayhem, while women worked tirelessly to tend to the needs of their families. The SS Sultana's crew struggled to maintain order in this sea of humanity. With 300 souls on board, it was a miracle they had managed to keep the boat afloat for so long. Engineer James Harrison, tasked with navigating the treacherous waters of the Mississippi, worked tirelessly to keep the vessel moving forward. Yet amidst all this chaos and bedlam, something sinister lurked in the shadows. The SS Sultana's condition was a ticking time bomb, waiting to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting passengers. The ship's hull had been weakened by years of overuse and neglect, a fact that would soon prove disastrous. As we look back on this pivotal moment in American history, it becomes clear that the SS Sultana was a powder keg of human error and design flaw. Its very existence was a testament to the chaos and confusion of war, where lives were tossed about like pawns in a game of chance. With each passing minute, the passengers remained blissfully unaware of their impending doom. Their focus was on reaching safety, on escaping the conflict that had ravaged their nation for so long. But what they didn't realize was that their salvation lay just ahead, waiting to be snatched away by an unseen hand. As we delve deeper into this tragic tale, it becomes increasingly clear that fate itself played a cruel hand in the story of the SS Sultana. The confluence of circumstance, the intersection of human error and chance, would soon prove catastrophic, leaving in its wake one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in American history. The calm before the storm was about to give way to a maelstrom of unimaginable proportions, shattering the hopes and dreams of over 800 innocent souls. As we edge ever closer to the heart of this tragedy, we'll discover that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there lies a haunting reminder of the human spirit's capacity for survival, no matter what horrors befall it. We're on the cusp of witnessing something that will forever leave its mark on the annals of American history. What comes next is both inexplicable and inevitable, an explosion that would rip apart the very fabric of hope itself. As we delve deeper into the catastrophic events that unfolded on the Mississippi River in 1865, we find ourselves amidst a tempest of unseasonable proportions. The skies above had grown dark and foreboding, as if sensing the impending doom that was to come. The rainstorms that had been battering the region for days had left their mark on the mighty Mississippi. The river's swollen waters now churned with a ferocity that belied its tranquil nature just weeks before. The current was treacherous, and the river's banks were clogged with debris, twisted tree trunks, snapped limbs, and tangled reeds. It was as if Mother Nature herself had conspired to create a maelstrom of unmitigated disaster. The usually predictable Mississippi had become a raging torrent, its waters churning with an otherworldly power that seemed almost malevolent. The SS Sultana, the ill-fated steamboat at the center of our story, was ill-equipped to navigate these treacherous waters. Built for speed and comfort, not ruggedness or resilience, she was a fragile vessel plying her trade in a sea of turbulent chaos. Her passengers, oblivious to the impending catastrophe, continued on their merry way, families returning from visits with loved ones, weary soldiers seeking solace after the long and brutal Civil War, and entrepreneurs eager to capitalize on the war-torn economy. All were bound for St. Louis, the bustling metropolis that lay just a few miles downstream. But fate had other plans. As we gaze upon this swirling vortex of water and chaos, we are reminded that even the most seemingly ordinary events can mask extraordinary consequences. The Mississippi River, once the lifeblood of American commerce and progress, had become a harbinger of doom, a grim omen that would soon unleash its full fury upon the unsuspecting souls on board. As night began to fall on April 25, 1865, the SS Sultana found herself caught in the throes of this tempest. The storm's full force was unleashed upon her fragile hull, as if intent on shattering her very existence. Captain James Cass Mason, a grizzled veteran of the river, had navigated countless storms and disasters before, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer ferocity that now assailed his vessel. The winds howled like banshees, threatening to snap the wooden masts in two. The rain lashed down with a ferocity that blinded all on board, and the river itself seemed determined to engulf her entire length. As we pause here, suspended between the calm of yesterday's hopes and the unrelenting terror of tomorrow's disasters, it becomes clear that something is terribly amiss. A perfect storm of circumstances, treacherous weather, a fragile vessel, and an unsuspecting crew and passengers had coalesced into a catastrophe waiting to happen. The very fabric of hope itself seems on the brink of being rent asunder by the raw power of nature. We are about to witness an explosion that will leave over 1,800 people dead in its wake, a toll so staggering it would become one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in American history. But what lies ahead is not just death and destruction, it's also a haunting question. How could something so preventable happen on this fateful night? What darkness lurked beneath the surface, waiting to unleash itself upon an unsuspecting world? As we prepare to confront the unimaginable horrors that await us, one thing becomes clear: the events about to unfold will challenge everything we thought we knew about resilience in the face of disaster. The Mississippi River, that great lifeblood of the American heartland, had been witness to countless tales of triumph and tragedy. But on this fateful day, April 27, 1865, it would bear witness to one of the most cataclysmic events in its storied history. The SS Sultana, a steamboat whose hull had carried countless dreams and destinies along its banks, was about to become an instrument of unspeakable horror. As we stand here, on the very spot where the disaster would unfold, it's hard not to feel a sense of foreboding. The air is heavy with anticipation, like the stillness before a storm. And yet, in the midst of this tranquility, a sense of unease begins to seep into our collective consciousness. The Sultana, with its gleaming iron hull and billowing smokestacks, had been making its way upstream from New Orleans, carrying a cargo hold full of hope and promise. Among its passengers were over 400 soldiers returning home from the war, families seeking to start anew, and laborers bound for the cotton fields of the South. But as we've seen in our previous chapter, all was not as it seemed on this fateful voyage. The Sultana's decks had been packed to bursting point, with passengers crammed into every available inch of space. The heat was sweltering, and tensions were running high among the traveling public. And then, without warning, disaster struck. At around 2:00 a.m., as the Sultana lay moored near Vicksburg, a sudden explosion shook the very foundations of the vessel. It began as a low rumble, like thunder on a summer's day, but quickly escalated into a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. Eyewitness accounts would later describe the scene as one of utter chaos and pandemonium. Panic-stricken passengers stumbled through the darkened corridors, screaming for their loved ones as they desperately sought escape from the inferno that was rapidly consuming them. The blast had originated in the ship's boiler room, where a faulty furnace had ignited a catastrophic chain reaction of explosions and fires. As the flames engulfed the vessel, the once majestic Sultana became a maelstrom of chaos, with passengers trapped below deck, screaming for help as the very walls seemed to be closing in on them. In the midst of this mayhem, a group of brave crew members, including Captain J.C. Tucker and engineer Robert Higgs, valiantly fought to keep the ship afloat, even as it began to take on water at an alarming rate. But their efforts were ultimately doomed by the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding around them. As we stand here today, in the shadow of this tragic event, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe and reverence for those who perished that fateful night. The Sultana's explosion would go down in history as one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in American history, a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of fate itself. The numbers are staggering. Over 1,800 people lost their lives in a matter of mere minutes. The survivors, those who managed to stumble ashore amidst the carnage, would be left forever scarred by the trauma they endured that night. But even as we pause to reflect on this unspeakable tragedy, it's essential to remember that the story of the SS Sultana is not just one of destruction and loss. It's also a testament to the indomitable human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, there lies a deep wellspring of resilience and determination. As we move forward into the next chapter of our narrative, we'll explore the complex web of factors that contributed to this disaster. We'll examine the role of human error, the pressures of wartime commerce, and the fragile social fabric of America in 1865. But for now, let us take a moment to pay respects to those who lost their lives on that fateful night, victims of a tragedy whose magnitude would be felt for generations to come. Their stories, though shrouded in mystery and tragedy, will serve as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of human courage in the face of unimaginable adversity. And as we bid farewell to this chapter in our narrative, let us ask ourselves, what other secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of America's turbulent past? What unspoken truths await discovery in the dark recesses of history? In the next chapter of our journey, we'll delve into the complex and often treacherous world of Reconstruction-era politics, a time when the very foundations of American society were being reshaped by the forces of change. The tranquility of the Mississippi River was shattered in an instant, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. The SS Sultana, a steamboat carrying over 400 passengers, was making its way downriver on April 27, 1865, when disaster struck. It's a day that would go down in infamy, etched into the annals of American history as one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in the nation's history. The blast sent debris flying in all directions, trapping many passengers beneath the wreckage. Panic and chaos erupted as survivors scrambled to free themselves from the twisted metal and timber. The screams of the injured mingled with the sounds of crashing wood and screeching metal, creating a cacophony of terror that still echoes through the ages. As the full extent of the disaster began to sink in, the true horror of the situation became clear. The Sultana had been severely overcrowded, with passengers packed tightly into its cramped cabins. Many were former Union prisoners who had just been released from Confederate captivity at Camp Chase in Ohio and were on their way home. Others were families fleeing the devastation of war-torn Mississippi. The explosion was catastrophic, but it's a miracle that anyone survived at all. The blast ripped through the boat's superstructure, mangling steel beams and shattering glass windows. Flames erupted from the boiler, engulfing everything in their path. It was as if the very foundations of the steamboat had been torn apart, unleashing a maelstrom of destruction upon its helpless passengers. As the survivors stumbled into the chaos-strewn waters, they were met with a scene of unmitigated horror. The once majestic Sultana now lay in ruins, its hull cracked and shattered like an eggshell. Debris littered the water, creating a sea of splintered wood and twisted metal that seemed to stretch on forever. The aftermath was nothing short of apocalyptic. Bodies were strewn about the riverbank, their faces contorted in agony as they succumbed to their injuries. Others floated face down in the water, their bodies battered and bruised beyond recognition. The cries for help grew louder, but there were too few rescuers to save them all. The SS Sultana's destruction was a testament to the brutal indifference of fate. On that fateful day, over 1,800 people lost their lives in an instant, victims not just of war, but also of circumstance and neglect. It was as if the very fabric of society had been torn apart, leaving nothing but chaos and despair in its wake. As we gaze upon the devastation wrought by the SS Sultana, we're reminded that even in the midst of peace, disaster can strike with little warning. The survivors of this tragedy would never be the same again, their lives forever scarred by the memories of that day. And yet, as they struggled to come to terms with what had happened, a new and equally daunting challenge loomed on the horizon. Reconstruction-era politics was a complex and often treacherous landscape, where former enemies were forced to navigate the minefield of reconciliation. It's a world of intrigue and deception, of corrupt politicians and duplicitous agendas, a time when the very foundations of American society were being reshaped by the forces of change. As we prepare to embark on this new journey through the uncharted territories of history, we find ourselves confronted with a profound question. What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of America's Reconstruction era? What untold stories and unseen events await discovery in the dark recesses of history? And so, as we bid farewell to the tragic tale of the SS Sultana, we're drawn inexorably into the next chapter of our journey, a world where allegiances are tested, loyalties are forged, and the very future of America hangs precariously in the balance. The stakes have never been higher, the players more complex, or the outcome more uncertain. As the SS Sultana's wreckage continued to smolder on the banks of the Mississippi River, the true horror of the disaster began to sink in. The numbers were staggering. Over 1,800 people had perished in what would become one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in American history. But as the survivors struggled to come to terms with their own mortality, a new challenge emerged, rescuing those still trapped in the wreckage. The river itself seemed determined to add its own contribution to the carnage, swelling with torrential rains that threatened to engulf what little remained of the steamer. Rescuers, many of them civilians who had rushed to the scene to help, waded into the icy waters, their faces set with determination. They knew the odds were against them, the river's current was treacherous, and the wreckage was a maze of twisted metal and splintered wood. But they also knew that every minute counted. As they made their way through the debris-strewn waters, they encountered scenes of unimaginable devastation. Families torn apart by the explosion lay scattered among the wreckage, their loved ones missing or dead. Children's toys, once a symbol of innocence and joy, now floated lifeless on the surface of the river. Despite the chaos, the rescuers worked with a precision that bordered on the miraculous. They used makeshift stretchers to pull survivors from the water, gently laying them down on the riverbank as if they were fragile birds. Some were already dead, their bodies broken beyond recognition. Others clung to life, their eyes vacant and unseeing. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and sweat and death. The sun beat down relentlessly, casting an eerie glow over the entire scene. And yet, amidst all this devastation, there were moments of quiet humanity, a nurse weeping as she cradled a dying child in her arms, a young couple clinging to each other, their faces etched with grief. As the hours ticked by, the rescuers' efforts began to take on an almost Sisyphean quality. They pulled survivor after survivor from the wreckage, only to be confronted with yet another victim trapped beneath the debris. The river seemed determined to keep its secrets hidden, and the rescuers were powerless against its fury. The survivors themselves were a microcosm of American society at large, young and old, rich and poor, black and white. They came from every corner of the country, all united in their quest for freedom and prosperity. And yet, as they stumbled through the wreckage, their faces twisted with pain and despair, it was clear that even the most fundamental human needs had been denied them. Food, shelter, safety, all these basic necessities were now a distant memory. In their place was a bleak, brutal reality. The SS Sultana had been more than just a steamboat, it had been a symbol of hope and escape for thousands of people. And now, as they struggled to come to terms with their loss, that hope seemed lost forever. As night began to fall on the Mississippi River, the rescuers' efforts slowly came to an end. The survivors were taken to makeshift shelters, set up along the riverbank. Hospitals, barracks, and even churches. But for many of them, there would be no refuge from the trauma they had experienced. The days that followed would be a blur of pain and confusion, as families struggled to piece together what had happened to their loved ones. They scoured the wreckage, searching for signs of life or death, anything to confirm whether those who had been on board were still alive. And then, just when it seemed the worst was over, the full extent of the disaster began to sink in. The SS Sultana's passenger list had included some of the most vulnerable people in America: freed slaves, refugees from the war-torn South, and destitute families fleeing poverty and hunger. Their stories would soon become a part of American lore, tales of loss and resilience that would echo through generations to come. But for now, as the survivors huddled together on the riverbank, their faces etched with grief and despair, there was only one thing they could be sure of: nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the SS Sultana disaster would prove a turning point in American history, a moment when the nation's very fabric began to unravel. The threads that had held it together for so long were now snapping, revealing deep cracks and fissures that would soon spread far beyond the banks of the Mississippi River. And as we stand on the precipice of this new era, one question echoes through the ages: what next? For those who survived the SS Sultana disaster, there would be no easy answers. But for America itself, the journey ahead was already taking shape, a road paved with uncertainty and fraught with peril. As we emerge from the smoldering wreckage of the SS Sultana, the full horror of that fateful night begins to unfurl before us like a ghastly tapestry. The Mississippi River's dark waters, once calm and tranquil, now reveal their gruesome secret. Over 1,800 lives lost in an instant, their souls extinguished by a cataclysmic explosion that sent shockwaves rippling through the very fabric of American society. The survivors, scattered and shell-shocked, stumble through the darkness, their minds reeling from the trauma they've endured. Many will never find peace again, haunted by the memories of loved ones lost, of friends torn from their side in a single heart-stopping moment. The sounds of weeping and wailing fill the air as families frantically search for any sign of their kin, only to be met with an eerie silence that speaks louder than words. In the aftermath of the disaster, the city of St. Louis awakens to a scene from Dante's Inferno: bodies floating on the river's surface, some still clutching valuables or personal belongings, others burned beyond recognition, their charred remains tangled in the wreckage like human sacrifices to a merciless god. The stench of death hangs heavy over the city, an acrid reminder that this was no ordinary tragedy, but a catastrophe that would shake America to its very core. As rescue teams struggle to cope with the scale of the disaster, a sense of chaos and confusion reigns supreme. Ambulances screech through the streets, sirens blaring as they rush to makeshift morgues, where pathologists work tirelessly to identify the deceased. Local hospitals overflow with survivors, many bearing injuries that will haunt them for the rest of their lives: burns from fires that raged unchecked, lacerations from flying debris, and worst of all, the psychological scars of witnessing unimaginable horror. In this maelstrom of grief and despair, one question dominates every conversation: what could have caused such a disaster? Theories abound, from faulty pipes to human error, but one thing is clear: the SS Sultana was woefully unprepared for its own catastrophe. No safety drills had been conducted, no evacuation plans were in place, and when disaster struck, panic set in with devastating consequences. As investigators begin their painstaking work to unravel the tangled threads of responsibility, a more sinister truth starts to emerge. The SS Sultana's owners, the Stevens family, have long histories of shady dealings and flagrant disregard for safety protocols. Their steamboat had been patched together from spare parts, its boilers creaking under pressure like an old wooden ship on its last legs. This was no accident. This was a ticking time bomb waiting to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting public. The SS Sultana disaster would go down in history as one of the deadliest peacetime catastrophes in American annals, but it would also serve as a stark reminder that, even in times of peace and plenty, human fallibility can have catastrophic consequences. As we stand amidst this devastation, we begin to grasp the full weight of America's post-Civil War reality, a nation struggling to find its bearings in a world forever changed. From the ashes of the SS Sultana disaster, we see glimmers of what lies ahead: social upheaval, economic uncertainty, and an unyielding quest for justice. And as we step into this brave new world, we can't help but wonder, where do we go from here? What lessons will America learn from its own hubris and complacency? And what other secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly tranquil river, waiting to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting nation. The mystery deepens. The waters run black. The silence is almost deafening. As we've seen, the SS Sultana's catastrophic explosion sent shockwaves through the nation, shattering the illusion of peace and tranquility that had settled over America in the aftermath of the Civil War. But the tragedy was not just a senseless act of fate. It was also a stark reminder of the gross negligence and corruption that had been festering beneath the surface of American society. A subsequent investigation, led by the U.S. Steamboat Inspector's Office, revealed a tangled web of incompetence and malfeasance among steamboat owners, officials, and regulators. The evidence painted a picture of a system that was more concerned with lining pockets than ensuring public safety. One of the most damning findings was that the Sultana's operators had been ignoring basic safety protocols for months prior to the disaster. Cracks in the boilers had been reported as early as January 1865, but instead of repairing or replacing them, the owners opted to patch up the damage and continue operating the vessel. This reckless disregard for human life was not an isolated incident. The investigation revealed that many steamboat operators were prioritizing profits over people, with some even bribing inspectors to look the other way when it came to safety regulations. The Sultana's explosion was just one symptom of a larger disease afflicting America in 1865, a culture of complacency and corruption that would have far-reaching consequences. As we delve deeper into this story, we'll explore how the very institutions tasked with protecting citizens were instead contributing to their suffering. One of those institutions was the U.S. Steamboat Inspector's Office itself. Founded just 5 years earlier, its purpose was to regulate steamboats and ensure they met basic safety standards. But as our investigation reveals, the office had become increasingly politicized and compromised by corruption. Inspectors would often accept bribes from operators in exchange for favorable inspections or lenient enforcement of regulations. This created a system where owners felt more inclined to bribe their way out of trouble than to invest in genuine safety upgrades. The Sultana's operators, the Thompson family, were among those who took advantage of this corrupt system. They had a long history of bribing inspectors and ignoring safety protocols, all while amassing a small fortune from their steamboat empire. In the aftermath of the disaster, it became clear that the Thompsons' negligence was not an isolated incident. Multiple investigations revealed widespread corruption and incompetence among steamboat operators and regulators alike. The public's outrage was palpable as the full extent of the Sultana tragedy began to sink in. How could such a preventable disaster have occurred? Why were safety protocols ignored? And why did those responsible for enforcing them seem more concerned with protecting their own interests than safeguarding human life? As we explore this darker side of American history, it becomes clear that the SS Sultana's explosion was not just an accident. It was a symptom of a larger disease, one that had its roots in the very institutions meant to protect and serve. In the years following the disaster, there would be numerous attempts to reform the steamboat industry and hold those responsible accountable. But as we'll see, these efforts were often hampered by entrenched interests and a deep-seated culture of complacency. As we stand on the banks of the Mississippi River, where the Sultana's wreckage lies submerged beneath the surface, it becomes clear that this tragedy was not just about one steamboat or its operators. It was about a nation's reckoning with its own flaws, a story of corruption, negligence, and the ongoing struggle for accountability. The waters may run black, but they also carry secrets. And as we continue to navigate the complexities of this story, we begin to realize that there are still many unanswered questions. As the SS Sultana's wreckage sank beneath the surface of the Mississippi River, a web of deceit and denial began to unfurl on land. The steamboat's owners, as well as government officials, moved swiftly to downplay the disaster, casting blame elsewhere in an attempt to mitigate their own culpability. It was an era marked by suspicion and mistrust. The final days of the Civil War had left the nation raw and vulnerable. But the catastrophe that occurred on April 27, 1865, was not a casualty of war. It was a peacetime disaster, born from a toxic cocktail of human error, neglect, and greed. In the immediate aftermath, officials scrambled to assign blame. Fingers were pointed at Confederate saboteurs, who allegedly planted explosives on board the steamboat in a last-ditch effort to sabotage Union supply lines. The narrative was one of treachery and terrorism, a perfect storm of myth-making, designed to deflect attention from the true causes of the disaster. The story began to take shape like a carefully crafted lie. Local newspapers, eager to please their readers, lapped up the tales of Confederate intrigue. They printed sensationalized accounts of daring sabotage and heroic rescue efforts, casting the victims as mere pawns in a larger game of wartime espionage. But beneath the surface, a more sinister reality was emerging. Documents obtained by investigators revealed that the Sultana's owners had been aware of the ship's fragile state for months. Indeed, they'd even delayed repairs to avoid costly maintenance. Meanwhile, government officials were equally culpable. They'd issued multiple steamboat licenses to the company, despite knowing full well its safety record was abysmal. As the truth began to seep out, a familiar pattern of behavior emerged. Powerful interests, more concerned with saving face than accountability, deployed their considerable influence to shape public opinion and whitewash their own role in the disaster. It was an insidious game of cover-up, with real people paying the ultimate price for the convenience of spin. The media played its part, too, some outlets publishing scathing editorials that railed against the incompetence of steamboat owners, while conveniently omitting the government's complicity. The public, still reeling from the assassination of President Lincoln just days before, was left to swallow the bitter pill of official denial. And so, as the nation mourned its fallen leader, a second tragedy unfolded with little fanfare. Over 1,800 souls were lost on that fateful night, their lives reduced to mere statistics in a hastily compiled accounting sheet. The media, it seemed, had more pressing stories to tell, like the trials and tribulations of General Lay's surrender at Appomattox. The contrast between the public narrative and the grim reality on board the Sultana is jarring even today. One can almost hear the whispers of history itself, a muffled voice urging us to confront the darker aspects of our collective past, rather than hastily burying them beneath the sands of time. As we continue to dig through the wreckage of this calamity, we begin to realize that accountability was not merely an afterthought but a deliberate choice. The cover-up extended far beyond the steamboat's owners and officials. It seeped into every level of government, influencing the very fabric of our society. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence of negligence and corruption, there are still those who prefer to cling to the comforting myth that this was simply an unfortunate accident, a chance tragedy that cannot be laid at anyone's door. But history is not so easily swayed by spin or ideology. It resists attempts to simplify its complexities, to sanitize its brutality. As we navigate these treacherous waters, we begin to confront the uncomfortable truth. This disaster was as much about America's addiction to power and profit as it was about a particular steamboat's tragic fate. It is a story of hubris, neglect, and deception, one that continues to haunt our nation to this very day. In the next chapter, we will delve deeper into the tangled web of corruption and cover-up that characterized the Sultana disaster. We'll meet the courageous investigators who dared challenge the official narrative, as well as those who stood in their way. The truth, it seems, is a many-headed beast, but one thing is certain: its jaws are still wide open, waiting to devour our most cherished illusions about this nation's past. The public's reaction to the Sultana disaster was swift and merciless. As news of the tragedy spread like wildfire across the nation, outrage boiled over into righteous indignation. The sheer scale of the loss of life, 1,800 souls lost in an instant, defied comprehension. How could something so catastrophic occur on American soil? In peacetime, panic gave way to anger as the public began to scrutinize the circumstances surrounding the explosion. Rumors swirled like a maelstrom, questions about the steamboat's safety record, its crew's competence, and the role of the Union Army in transporting freed slaves. As more details emerged, so did calls for accountability. Newspapers across the country ran scathing editorials condemning the disaster as a preventable tragedy. The New York Tribune raged against the recklessness of steamboat management, while the Cincinnati Gazette accused officials of being incompetent or worse. Headlines screamed in bold type, "Steamboat Horror, 1,800 lives lost," and "The Sultana's secret. Was it an accident or a sinister plot?" Public opinion was in a state of ferment. Citizens demanded answers from their leaders, and the politicians were quick to oblige. Congressional hearings convened, with senators and representatives grilling officials for information on the disaster's causes and consequences. The most pressing question, however, remained unanswered: who would be held accountable? The Union Army's Inspector General, Joseph Holt, took charge of the investigation, but soon found himself facing a daunting task untangling a web of conflicting accounts, dubious testimony, and bureaucratic obfuscation. As he pored over reports and depositions, one thing became clear: the official narrative was beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, outside the halls of power, ordinary Americans were demanding change. They called for reforms in steamboat safety and regulation, decrying the lax standards that had allowed such a disaster to occur. The New York Herald editorialized that some radical changes must be made in the way steamboats were managed, while the Chicago Tribune argued that the public's confidence in these vessels has been irreparably shaken. In the midst of this maelstrom, one man stood tall, or rather, refused to stand down. James H. Lindsley, a seasoned engineer and railroad expert, had already begun questioning the official explanation for the disaster. A fierce critic of the Union Army's handling of steamboat safety, he now found himself at odds with some of his own colleagues. "We must confront the truth," Lindsley thundered to anyone who would listen. The Sultana was a death trap waiting to happen, and were just beginning to scratch the surface. As public pressure mounted, so did the stakes. The investigation into the Sultana disaster had only just begun, but already its findings threatened to upend everything the nation thought it knew about itself. In the shadows, however, there were those who dared to challenge this new narrative, and their voices would soon be heard above the din of public outcry. As the nation grappled with the truth of its own complicity in the Sultana disaster, there emerged a cast of characters who would challenge this new narrative, forcing the American people to confront the darkest corners of their collective conscience. In the sweltering summer of 1865, as the war-torn nation struggled to find its footing in the aftermath of Appomattox, a group of determined individuals began to peel back the layers of officialdom and spin, revealing a story that would shake the very foundations of American history. At the forefront of this effort was one man, a former slave-turned-abolitionist journalist named William M. Crook. A scion of the anti-slavery movement, Crook had spent years chronicling the horrors of slavery, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale and brutality of the Sultana disaster. As he delved deeper into the tragedy, Crook became increasingly obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the catastrophe. He pored over official reports, interviewed survivors, and scoured the countryside for physical evidence, determined to expose the shocking extent of corruption and negligence that had led to the explosion. But as he dug, Crook encountered a formidable obstacle: the entrenched power structure that had allowed the disaster to occur in the first place. The steamboat industry, with its deep connections to the Republican Party, was quick to dismiss Crook's allegations, labeling him an agitator and a troublemaker. Undeterred, Crook pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to bring justice to the victims of the Sultana disaster. His efforts were not in vain. As his story began to gain traction in the press, public opinion started to shift, with many demanding answers about how such a tragedy could have occurred under the watchful eyes of federal authorities. Yet for every voice raised in outrage, there seemed to be another whispering in opposition, a siren's song of silence and forgetting that would haunt the Sultana disaster for generations to come. The steamboat industry, having weathered one storm, set its sights on erasing the catastrophe from public memory altogether. In the midst of this maelstrom, a young journalist named Thomas Jordan emerged as Crook's unlikely ally. A talented writer and researcher with a keen eye for detail, Jordan had been working on his own investigation into the disaster when he stumbled upon Crook's explosive exposé. The two men formed an unstoppable partnership, working tirelessly to uncover the full extent of the Sultana tragedy. Together, they scoured dusty archives, interviewed eyewitnesses, and pored over documents, determined to shed light on a story that had been shrouded in darkness for far too long. Their efforts would not go unnoticed. As the public clamored for answers, politicians began to take notice, forced to confront the consequences of their own actions or inactions in the months leading up to the disaster. But even as the tide began to turn against those responsible, a sinister undercurrent continued to flow beneath the surface, a current of corruption, cronyism, and cover-up that would threaten to engulf the entire nation. For in the shadows, there lurked a cabal of powerful figures who had far more to lose than just their reputations, and they would stop at nothing to keep the truth about the Sultana disaster buried forever. As we stand on the precipice of this dark chapter in American history, it's worth remembering that the Sultana tragedy was not simply a calamitous event, but a symptom of a larger disease, a malaise that had infected the very fabric of the nation itself. And as we continue our journey into the heart of darkness, one question haunts us still: what happens when the ghosts of the past finally find their voice? As we stand on the banks of the Mississippi River, the misty veil that shrouds the water seems to echo the whispers of the past. The SS Sultana's tragic demise serves as a stark reminder that even in the midst of victory and jubilation, the seeds of catastrophe can be sown. The year was 1865, and the Civil War had finally come to an end. But amidst the celebrations, a new kind of battle raged, one fought not with muskets and cannons, but with bureaucratic incompetence and human error. The Sultana's explosion would go on to claim over 1,800 lives, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams and broken families. As we reflect on this devastating event, it becomes clear that the tragedy was not simply a calamitous occurrence, but a symptom of a larger disease, one that had infected the very fabric of the nation itself. The SS Sultana's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency, of allowing systemic flaws to fester and grow until they become catastrophic. In the aftermath of the disaster, the public outcry was immense. How could such a tragedy have occurred? What failures had led to this unprecedented loss of life? But as the questions swirled, so too did the excuses. The steamboat's captain, Thomas W. Scott, would later testify that he had warned the authorities about the overloaded condition of the Sultana weeks before its fateful voyage. But warning signs are often ignored when they are inconvenient or unpopular. And so, as we ponder the events leading up to this disaster, we're forced to confront a harsh reality. Even in the face of clear and present danger, human nature can be prone to turning a blind eye. In the words of historian Mark M. Smith, the Sultana's explosion was not just an accident, it was also a manifestation of a society in disarray. A nation reeling from 4 years of war, struggling to rebuild and redefine itself, left vulnerable to the ravages of its own internal decay. As we stand on the banks of the Mississippi, the mist begins to clear, revealing the outlines of a long-forgotten tragedy. And it's here that we're reminded of the importance of remembering not just the events themselves, but also the context in which they unfolded. For it's only by grasping the complexities and nuances of history's darkest moments that we can truly begin to understand their significance. The SS Sultana's story serves as a poignant reminder that even in times of peace and prosperity, the shadows of the past can still linger, waiting to be unearthed. As we continue our journey into the heart of darkness, one question lingers, a haunting echo of the ghosts who demand to be heard. What happens when the voices of the past finally find their way into the present? And it's in this very moment that we're brought face to face with another tragedy, one that would shake the nation to its core. A story of loss and betrayal, of corruption and deceit. The tale of a ship called the USS Monitor, its fate forever intertwined with the Sultana's. But that's a journey for another time. For now, let us take a moment to honor the memories of those who perished on the SS Sultana, their lives lost in an instant, yet their stories preserved through the power of history. And as we bid farewell to this chapter, we're left with one final question. Will we heed the lessons of the past, or will we continue down a path that's already been fraught with peril? The choice is ours, but one thing is certain: the ghosts of the Sultana will not be silenced. As we navigate the treacherous waters of history, it's essential to chart our course through the key events that led up to the SS Sultana disaster. The timeline is a complex web of circumstance and misfortune, but by examining each strand, we can begin to understand the catastrophic convergence that would claim over 1,800 lives. On April 24, 1865, the steamboat SS Sultana set off from Vicksburg, Mississippi, bound for St. Louis, Missouri. The vessel was carrying a cargo of approximately 250 passengers and crew members, many of whom were returning Union veterans who had been freed from Confederate prison camps. The mood on board was jubilant, with the war finally coming to an end and a sense of liberation palpable in the air. As we follow the Sultana's journey upstream, it becomes clear that this would be no ordinary voyage. The ship was overcrowded, with many passengers forced to stand or sit on deck due to lack of available seating. The boiler had been repaired hastily before departure, and rumors were circulating about the vessel's seaworthiness. On board the Sultana, tensions ran high as the passengers and crew struggled to find adequate space. Veterans, some still recovering from their experiences in prison camps, were packed tightly alongside civilians and other freed slaves. The air was thick with excitement and anxiety as the ship chugged along the Mississippi River. As we fast forward to April 26, 1865, the the Sultana had reached Helena, Arkansas, where a critical decision would be made that would seal its fate. The ship's captain, James Cassell, opted not to stop for repairs at this crucial juncture, despite pleas from his crew and passengers to address the boiler issues. Meanwhile, back in St. Louis, a group of anxious relatives and friends had been waiting anxiously for news of their loved ones on board the Sultana. The anticipation was palpable as they tracked the ship's progress upstream. Little did they know that the very fate of those on board hung precariously in the balance. On April 27th, the SS Sultana reached island number 10, a strategic location where the river widens into a vast expanse. It was here that Captain Cassell would make his next fateful decision: to bypass the nearby city of Memphis and continue on towards St. Louis without further delay. As we near the climax of our story, the Sultana is now steaming towards its final destination, still carrying over 1,800 passengers and crew members in a precarious state of overcrowding. Meanwhile, back upstream, a sense of unease had begun to grip those on board. Rumors were circulating about the ship's instability, but many passengers remained blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just ahead. In the early hours of April 27th, disaster struck without warning. A catastrophic explosion ripped through the Sultana's boiler, sending shrapnel and debris flying in all directions. Panic erupted as those on board scrambled to flee the carnage. In the chaos that followed, many passengers were trapped below deck or thrown into the water. As we pause to reflect on the devastation wrought by this tragedy, it's essential to remember the scale of the disaster. Over 1,800 lives lost in one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in U.S. history. The Sultana explosion would forever be etched into the collective memory as a stark reminder of human fallibility and the unforgiving nature of the Mississippi River. As we bid farewell to this chapter of our journey through time, we're left with a haunting question: what could have been done differently? Could Captain Cassell have made alternative decisions that might have prevented the Sultana's demise? Or was this disaster simply an inevitable consequence of circumstance? The answer, as ever, lies hidden in the annals of history. But one thing is certain: the SS Sultana disaster would serve as a stark reminder to future generations of the importance of vigilance and foresight when navigating the complex web of human endeavor. And so, as we embark on the next chapter of our journey, we find ourselves at a critical juncture in American history. The Reconstruction era is about to unfold, and with it, a new set of challenges that will test the mettle of the nation once more. Will the lessons of the Sultana be heeded, or will we forge ahead into the unknown, bound by the same blind spots and misfortunes that led to this catastrophe? The choice is ours, but one thing is certain: the legacy of the SS Sultana will continue to resonate through the ages, a poignant reminder of the enduring power of human error and the unforgiving nature of history itself. As we bid farewell to the ill-fated SS Sultana, it's essential to acknowledge that this calamity is more than just a footnote in the annals of history. To truly comprehend its significance, one must delve deeper into the archives and scholarly works that shed light on this pivotal event. For those seeking a comprehensive understanding of the SS Sultana disaster, I recommend beginning with Charles River Editor's meticulous The Sultana Disaster, the story behind one of America's worst maritime disasters. This concise yet informative book distills the complex narrative into an accessible and engaging account. In addition to this foundational text, historians have long relied on the seminal work of James A. Woodburn, The Sultana Tragedy, 1902. First published in 1902, Woodburn's monograph remains a seminal contribution to our understanding of the disaster, offering a detailed analysis of its causes and consequences. For a more immersive experience, I suggest consulting the records compiled by the National Archives' extensive collection on the SS Sultana. Within this treasure trove, one can peruse passenger manifests, crew reports, and official investigations, all painstakingly preserved for posterity. Among the most poignant and evocative accounts of the disaster is that offered by the eyewitnesses themselves. Thomas B. Hines' Sultana Disaster, a personal account, 1915, stands as a haunting testament to the horrors endured by those on board. Scholars have also drawn upon the works of renowned historian Albert E. Castell, whose exhaustive research into the SS Sultana catastrophe has greatly expanded our understanding of this pivotal event within the broader context of the American Civil War and Reconstruction. For those with a particular interest in the technological aspects of the disaster, I recommend consulting Charles River Editor's The Steamboat, a history from the invention of the steam engine to the present day. This comprehensive tome provides an engaging exploration of the early development of steam-powered vessels, shedding light on the innovations and compromises that contributed to this catastrophe. Beyond these primary sources and historical accounts, numerous other works offer valuable insights into the SS Sultana's place within American history. Mark A. Laws's The Clay We Are, Social Reorganization and Mass Dispossession in America, 2017, offers a nuanced exploration of the post-Civil War era's social upheaval, while Michael Klarman's The Framers' Coup, The Making of the United States Constitution, 2016, places the SS Sultana within the larger narrative of American constitutional development. As we continue to unravel the tangled threads of this complex event, it becomes increasingly evident that the SS Sultana's legacy extends far beyond its immediate context. It speaks to fundamental questions about human fallibility, technological innovation, and the enduring consequences of historical events on our collective psyche. And yet, despite these efforts to comprehend the SS Sultana disaster, there remains a profound sense of mystery surrounding this catastrophe, an enigma that continues to haunt us as we reflect upon the blind spots, biases, and misfortunes that led to its tragic outcome. As we pause to consider the lessons of the SS Sultana, we find ourselves on the cusp of yet another pivotal moment in American history, a story so deeply intertwined with our own that it threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about this tumultuous period. The clock is ticking,